the 15 game requirement feels like, again, it's a cautionary thing to have in there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Contrasting view from Paul Scott says, we're in 2020, not the year dot. We're paying executives to come up with crap like this. Only in rugby league, we're our own worst enemies.
What I would say to Paul is I'm almost certain, although I don't follow the sport religiously, but points percentage came into play in League One, League Two, the conference championship, the conference regional divisions of association football. So it's not only in rugby league, is what I would say. Maybe those seasons were kind of close to their climax, so whatever. But there were still people who felt aggrieved in those sports. That points percentage came into it when people didn't get to finish off their seasons. So it's not only rugby league.
No.
Bob Phillips said, it's still about the games and beating Wigan Warriors, isn't it? I think his point there is it's still a case of if you win all your games, you finish higher up. The more the games you win, the higher you finish up the table.
Yeah, exactly. And because obviously the table as it is now, obviously has changed. But I think I said this earlier. You can change this table.
Well, the table
the
table has seen six clubs, move positions. The same thing happened when Toronto moved out of the competition before the resumption, and when Toronto were removed from the competition and their results were expunged from the records. Actually, it had a more material change, I think, because it meant one of the teams moved out of the playoff places. Now, of course, that was 3 matches ago, so we're a little bit further on, but we're not as much further on as people might think than we were then.
No. Tom Andrews says, weird system that I can see some teams potentially exploiting, but as a KR fan, it will make little or no difference to us. Personally, still excited by the season, but purely based on how KR are playing at the moment. Opinion sent pre-Saints game.
That teams potentially exploiting the system. What do you think to that? And do you think the RFL and Super League have tried to put some breaks into that with the way they've organised the rules?
I see. I read that Tom was referring to the salary cap bit. But I mean,
I've seen people suggest that teams might exploit the fixtures part as well by trying to get games postponed so that they can play enough games to have 15 games, but play more games with fully fit sides than not when they've got short turnarounds and those sorts of ideas.
Yeah, that sounds very Machiavellian and a little bit beyond people, I would argue. Good luck with what are you going to? Are you faking positive test results now or something? I don't know how you're going to do that.
Yeah, we'll address that. I think we can address that a little bit more when we've gone through all the fan views, because I've got a few thoughts around that myself. It does seem implausible.
Yeah, but there will, there are some, the salary cap has been tweaked, which means that it gives, because it talks about a 30,000 value, doesn't it? So if you're signing a player for 2 months, say, you could get a better player than £30,000 a year. Do you know what I mean? Type thing.
Well, it's talking about players you've already got, really, isn't it? Yes. Part, it's talking more about players you've already got on your sort of register of players, but maybe players that you wouldn't have played because if you play them, they then count under the salary cap.
Yeah.
And then
it's the outer reach of the squad, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is the players recalled from loan to other clubs, which we talked about. Hull KR have recalled some players. Wigan have recalled some players earlier on. Jack Wells has been named in a few squads, but he was at Toronto earlier on in the season. It seems like they're only going to be allowed to sign replacements if they already have cap space, sign more players if they already have cap space, or if they get a player removed, a player's cap value removed. Yeah,
and that's obviously, that's the kind of circumstance you don't want, because it's kind of indicating that a player's health is suffering to such a degree that he
can't play.
He can't play.
No one wants that.
Which is not what anyone wants.
Sean Dunn said, Not excited by the season until I can go back to games. Same as the football, it doesn't feel the same. I think a lot of people feel the same way, Sean, and I would say I agree that it doesn't feel the same, but I think it's hard to stop ourselves supporting the sport and taking any joy from the sport whilst we can't go to games. Kind of is counterproductive because we don't know when we're going to get to go to games, especially with the way the laws and rules and stuff are being revised and reviewed and changed. I mean, the government have even said today 1st of October is not necessarily nailed on now, so but I do feel your sentiment, Sean, completely.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we all miss going. It's just, it's anyway. Dave Contrell says, another Wigan dig. Makes perfect sense unless Wigan win. Yeah, agree.
Tim Griffiths, our friend Tim, who'll be on the show next week, he said, a pragmatic solution, not ideal, but given what's happened and the resources available, getting the season over the line will be a massive achievement. I'd rather die trying. Fair play to those at the top for going for it. So that's a more positive spin on this.
Yeah, I think that was my instinct when I first read it. But it's both pragmatic and it's getting out in front of the problem before we're in, mid-October and we've got fixtures coming, kind of backlogs coming out of our ears. It feels like we've actually indicated our way forward with it, which is positive. Whether you agree with it. Joshua's granddad, John, says, desperate to get to a grand final, we have reached this fudge. Has Sky agreed to how much more money they will want back? If 15 is to be the magic number, why not just aim for a 15-game season? We're used to a distorted fixture list with loop fixtures and then going into playoffs, even making it a top 8 if time permits. I think that's unlikely.
I think what I would suggest to that is they've probably looked at a way, John, of adapting rather than ripping up and starting again with this approach that they've put on. I don't think 15 is the magic number. I think the magic number was 22, because that's what was decided on when they wanted to resume the season. But unfortunately, with the Toronto circumstance and I think the unexpected amount of positive tests and the way that is operated and loss of fixtures has just exacerbated the situation. That magic number has had to be amended to a acceptable number. So I don't think 15 is the magic. I think you've looked at it the other way round to what is the truth. I don't think 15 is anyone's ideal at all. I think it's the least worst rather than the ideal magic one. That's the way I see it. So yeah. But I'm sure, I think lots of teams would like a top 8 playoffs and a chance to be at the grand final.
I mean,
I wonder what position Hull are sat in. Did they happen to be sat in 8th at all?
Don't know. There's always the possibility to fall lower than that. I mean, the point about Sky money, I think we've already had so many games, haven't we, since resumption that we might have fulfilled minimum numbers.
I don't think we're probably not quite there yet, but
not quite yet, but
another month of every game on Sky, and that would be in the region of 40 fixtures since we've resumed the season, and I think the contract's only for around about 70 fixtures. So if you add in the couple of dozen we played before the season started, before the season was broken up and then restarted, then we're probably getting close, aren't we?
I would say so. Yeah, and I think the agreement was probably based on that kind of assumption because, I think we've all said that Sky were really keen on having something to fill the gap until football came back, and we've managed to do that.
And they want that autumn, like, Jewel in the Crown event sort of thing, because as international fixtures in all sports kind of fall away as well. that's a feature for them to be able to advertise in November. This is our big splash for November: Super League playoffs, Super League grand final. Obviously the headline will be Premier League bollocks, but maybe we'll get ahead of like golf or something on the rundown of what's on this month. Mark Butler said, "What we're seeing is a reasonable response to an unpredictable situation and decent planning for once. The only drawback seems to be the gripes of people getting their knickers in a twist about who has played who, pandering to teams who haven't won games, as if we shouldn't even try to complete just to appease them. That's silly anyway, but especially as nobody is getting relegated, so it's a victimless solution." I like that.
I have seen people talk about, they've played, traditionally more difficult teams more often than others. And that's always a possibility, isn't it?
But those people are coming from the point of view, the bollocks point of view, that all the clubs are now just going to think, hey, fuck the games off. That's not what this is about.
No.
Warrington and Wakefield could have turned round today after this announcement and said, we're not fucking playing this week now. We don't have to. We've got the 7.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They want to play. And I think that's the spirit that most teams will be adopting to this, and everyone will assume that Wigan or Leeds or X other club that they don't like, that have done questionable things in the past, will be aiming to do this, to play some master plan and manipulate the situation. But ultimately, that's not the case. All the teams want to play as many games as possible and be in the position on merit and keep form and fitness and health of their squad, because if you have an outbreak where you've got to put 7 players down, you're not just missing 1 game, you're missing 2. So who wants to have 2 weeks off potentially before a Challenge Cup final or around a Challenge Cup final? No one's planning to have games off. Get that out of your heads, people. We've got so much distrust now because we have people in power that we cannot trust because they willfully break the law, right? And incite, hatred and violence and things like that. That is not what we should be looking at. We should be looking at through a more hopeful lens, that this is a worst case scenario plan rather than this is going to help people manipulate the situation. We've lost trust in this world. Please, people, start getting it back. It'll be a nicer place to live in. Anyway, sorry. Body bruise.
Can't disagree. He says, traditionalists will be happy. The table was always used to be determined by win percentage. Not sure how my spreadsheets are going to cope with it all, though.
Oh, the worst part of the spreadsheet part is trying to figure out what they're on about with that points percentage thing. Why aren't they taking games played into consideration in the points percentage thing? I didn't understand the rhetoric around that part. But anyway, we needed another tiebreaker before we got the coin toss.
Yeah, because it means that if you play, you're not disadvantaged by playing 15 as opposed to 13 or 17 versus 15.
Yeah.
So it takes the number of games played out of the consideration. I think is why why they're using that rather than points, for and against type stuff.
But it is a big thing for traditionalists, like we've said. I can't remember if we said it whilst we were recording or pre-recorded, but all traditionalists obviously love the grand final because it was played for 75 years before it was removed for 30 years and then came back. So traditionalists love this kind of stuff. So anyone who's asked for winter rugby should also clearly be a huge proponent of grand finals and points percentage rugby. It's as simple as that. Right. So we've kind of floated in our views as we've gone along a little bit, and we're leaning towards the positives and end of scale. I think you're more at the positive end than me. So do you want to sort of outline what you think about these changes, what you like about these changes?
Okay. The first thing I like about it is that we're having a conversation about it in early September, where it's not going to bite probably until late October, early November. We're having a conversation, and we've got a way forward with it, way ahead of where it's going to really cause us problems.